Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha with all the latest news and events from India and across the world. First up, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with Vietnamese leadership. Both sides signed 12 agreements and pledged to strengthen deeper economic and strategic ties. World leaders arrive in Hangzhou in China for the G20 summit. China ratifies emissions cutting Paris Agreement ahead of United States announcing its participation. Home Minister Rajnath Singh meets all-party delegation bound for Kashmir. 30-member team told to speak in one voice to people in Kashmir. CPIM and Congress seek talks with separatists. An explosion rips back night market in Philippines' Davao City. At least a dozen people killed. President Rodrigo Duterte declares a state of lawlessness. Our top focus this evening. Before embarking on the crucial G20 summit in China, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today held bilateral talks with the Vietnamese leadership. Both sides signed a dozen agreements and a pledge to strengthen deeper economic and strategic ties. Prime Minister Modi also announced a new $500 million line of credit to facilitate deeper defense cooperation. Our correspondent Neelu Vyas gets us the details from Hanoi.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi paying tributes at the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum in the Vietnamese capital, Hanoi. After the guard of honor, both Modi and his Vietnamese counterpart, Nguyen Xuan Phuc, got down to business. The bilateral talks were followed by delegation-level talks, at which 12 crucial agreements were signed. They included cooperation on cybersecurity, a contract with Larsen & Toubro for offshore patrol boats, an MOU on information technology, implementing cooperation in UN peacekeeping operations, exploration and use of outer space for peaceful purposes, and agreement on sharing white shipping information.
Under Vietnam's leadership, as ASEAN coordinator for India, we will work towards a strengthened India-ASEAN partnership across all areas.
Upgrading the partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership, the Prime Minister emphasized need for India and Vietnam to cooperate on emerging regional challenges. Defense being one of the key deliverables during his visit, Modi announced a new $500 million line of credit only for defense cooperation.
I'm also happy to announce a new defense line of credit for Vietnam of $500 million for facilitating deeper defense cooperation.
India also offered a grant of $5 million for a software park in the Telecommunications University in Nha Trang. The framework agreement on space cooperation will allow Vietnam to join hands with the Indian Space Research Organization to meet national development objectives.
The agreements in education will also enable Vietnamese citizens to take advantage of India's excellence in education. Also, we have agreed to cooperate in UN peacekeeping, where India will train more Vietnamese troops in UN peacekeeping. So, in overall terms, I look at this visit as setting a new benchmark for India-Vietnamese ties, which will take our relationship to a whole new level.
Modi also emphasized the cultural ties between the two nations, especially the link with Buddhism. At a meeting with over 300 monks at the famous Uan Shu Pagoda, the Prime Minister recalled how the Buddha was such a big link among the Southeast Asian nations. Both countries also decided to celebrate 2017 as the year of friendship.
Prime Minister Modi today mentioned that there was a need for the two nations to recognize together the emerging regional challenges, which was a subtle but an indirect hint to the South China Sea issue being discussed at the dialogue table, avoiding any reactions from Beijing for the moment. But its stronger and deeper defense ties between India and Vietnam have now become a reason for China to be alert. This trip has that India, by holding hands of Vietnam, can certainly become a balancing power in Southeast Asia. With camera person Anirban and Sudhanshu, this is Neelu Vyas signing off from Hanoi for Rajya Sabha TV.
In fact, Neelu Vyas is joining us live from Hanoi this evening. Neelu, a very good evening. It has been a very brief but significant visit by our Prime Minister, isn't it? So if you could take us through the high points that the visit has achieved in terms of bilateral relationship both for India and Vietnam.
Coming to the brass tacks of what actually has happened, if you really look, Tina, at the 12 agreements which have been signed today, the key focus areas have been defense, IT, space, avoidance of the double taxation. So basically, the major push has been given to the strategic ties. If you look at the joint statement of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Vietnamese counterpart, he very clearly has said that their main focus was to deepen and strengthen the strategic ties. And the strategic ties, not to mention, have been upgraded to the comprehensive strategic ties level. So this is a major push given to the strategic ties between India and Vietnam. But the timing of these agreements, and not to forget, the major deliverable of the day has been the announcement of the new $500 million line of credit, which has been extended by India to Vietnam. This was one of the key deliverables of the day. So the major focus area has been defense. But the timing, as I was telling you, is very important because this announcement is coming at a time when China is flexing its muscles in South China Sea. The International Court has disqualified China's claims to South China Sea. So basically, the timing of the announcement is very important. And now one has to understand that why India's friendship with Vietnam is most significant at this point of time when South China Sea dispute is very hot. Now, because 50% of India's trade basically goes through the South China Sea. This waterway is very important for India's trade. And Vietnam is also staking claim to South China Sea. So by holding Vietnam's hand, India by holding Vietnam's hand is trying to give out a signal to China that, look, we are together. If you remember, during the earlier part of the day, MEA spokesperson Vikas Swarup, if you look at the tweet, he has written 12 for togetherness. He's clearly hinting out at the 12 agreements which have been signed as a sign of togetherness. So this, of course, is a reason for China to remain. But at the same time, the larger message sent out by India is about the defense engagement, about the bilateral engagement with Vietnam in the Southeast Asian region. And of course, the larger message is that India is trying to counter China's string of pearls strategy, which is clearly to contain China at the moment.
That's right, Neelu. And also, if you could share details with us about the defense cooperation deal that's been signed between India and Vietnam. And because you mentioned the South China Sea, during the bilateral talks, was any reference made directly by our Prime Minister in context with the South China Sea to the Vietnamese leadership?
That's the key, of today's Vietnam trip of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. If you look at the joint statement carefully, he very clearly said that there is a need for the two nations, that is India and Vietnam, to recognize together the emerging regional challenges. Now, of course, regional challenges clearly mentions the fact that they are talking about the stickiest issue of South China Sea. Of course, they have not mentioned the word SCS, that is South China Sea, but without mentioning it, without ruffling or China at the moment, and also avoiding reactions by China, they have actually addressed the issue of South China Sea, but in a very subtle manner. And of course, if you look at the further specifics of the defense deals, the contract on the construction of the patrol boats which India will give to Vietnam is another clear example of how defense cooperation will be speeded up between the two nations. So ramping up defense ties, ramping up the strategic ties between India and Vietnam is, of course, very important in the Southeast Asian nation to counter, as I told you earlier, the China string of pearls strategy. So that is the larger message that, look, India and Vietnam are together.
That's right.
With that togetherness, they will try to counter the China string of pearls strategy and also send out the larger message that, look, we are an emerging power, an emerging balancing power in Southeast Asia.
All right, Neelu,
Back to
many
you.
thanks for joining us with those details and helping us understand what happened during the bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and the Vietnamese leadership. Moving on, from Vietnam, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also headed for China, where he is set to attend the G20 summit on Sunday in Hangzhou. He joins leaders of all G20 nations and 7 other guest countries as they discuss the global economy. Climate change is also likely to be discussed, with China ratifying the Paris Climate Accord just ahead of.
World leaders arrived in Hangzhou in China for the G20 summit that begins Sunday. Before the summit began, China ratified the emissions-cutting Paris Agreement, giving a big boost to efforts to bring the accord into effect by the end of this year. The United States is also expected to announce that it was formally joining the Paris Agreement before the summit starts.
One of the reasons I ran for this office was to make sure that America does its part to protect this planet for future generations. Over the past 7.5 years, we've transformed the United States into a global leader in the fight against climate change. But this is not a fight that any one country, no matter how powerful, can take alone. That's why last December's Paris Agreement was so important.
Ahead of the G20 meet, the leaders also met for the B20 summit, a key platform for the international business community to participate in global economic governance and to support the work of the G20 by making policy suggestions and recommendations for its leaders.
主办杭州峰会的目标之一是推动20国集团实现从短期政策向中长期政策转型，从危机应对向长效治理机制转型，巩固其作为全球经济治理重要平台的地位。
The Chinese president also held one-on-one meetings with leaders of Turkey, Argentina and Italy, among others, on the sidelines of the summit. Hangzhou has virtually become a ghost town as it gears up to host the event, as the authorities have ensured that security remains foolproof. Shops have been closed down and security checks ramped up to ensure the first ever G20 summit here passes off perfectly. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And back home, a day ahead of the all-party delegation visit to Kashmir, opposition parties called for holding a dialogue with all stakeholders, including the Hurriyat Conference. Opposition members also suggested announcing of confidence-building measures by the government ahead of the visit so as to douse the unrest in the valley. Home Minister Rajnath Singh convened a meeting of the all-party delegation that will visit Kashmir on Sunday. The 30-member delegation was made aware of the prevailing situation in the state as well as the contours of the tour, during which they will hold talks with a cross-section of people. The purpose of the session was to ensure that all MPs speak in one voice with consensus to the people in Kashmir.
all-party delegation जाने वाला है, उस delegation की आज बैठक हुई और सभी ने अपने अपने सुझाव दिए हैं। वहां जाकर यह डेलीगेशन जो प्रतिनिधिमंडल होंगे वहां के उन सारे प्रतिनिधिमंडल से मिलेगा और उनसे मिलने के बाद दिल्ली वापस लौटने पर फिर यह प्रतिनिधिमंडल बैठक मिलेगा और इस प्रतिनिधिमंडल के जो सदस्य होंगे, जो भी उनके सुझाव होंगे, उस सुझाव के आधार पर सरकार आगे कार्रवाई करेगी।
A number of opposition leaders suggested that the dialogue to restore peace in Kashmir must include all stakeholders, including leaders of the Hurriyat Conference.
We have said the options of the dialogue should be always open with all the stakeholders. So that is for the government of India to decide who the stakeholders are.
What we are suggesting now is this delegation, when it goes there, something tangible outcome must be there. So first of all, after this delegation goes there, either there or once we come back, announce the tangible things like withdrawal of the pellet guns. Number two, the letter of invitation that has been sent to various parties and various civil society groups to come and meet us. The same letter should go also to the various factions of the Hurriyat.
हम लोगों को जाना चाहिए वहाँ और उनको निमंत्रण देना चाहिए, उनको बुलाना चाहिए और अगर उसके बाद भी वो नहीं आते हैं तो कम से कम हमको ये कहने का हक रहेगा कि हमने अपनी ओर से पूरा प्रयास किया है।
स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को सबको इनविटेशन भेजना चाहिए और जाकर बात करें और उनको अगर हुर्रियत के लोगों को भी बात बुलाना चाहिए कि हम बात सुनेंगे उनकी और जो भी बात होगी देखेंगे क्योंकि हालात को नॉर्मलसी पे लाना है.
Others expressed confidence that the delegation will be able to put across the message of peace and harmony in the valley.
वातावरण बेहतर हो, हम राष्ट्रीय एकता अखंडता के सवाल पर एक हैं, पीस हो, शांति हो और शांति के वातावरण का निर्माण हो.
जम्मू कश्मीर के आवाम में विश्वास जगाए, उसको फिर से राष्ट्र के मुख्य धारा में लाए और वहां के लोगों के लिए जो एक विश्वास का एक डेफिसिट हो गया है उसकी पूर्ति करें. अगर हम यही कर दें तो बहुत है, एक शुरुआत है एक संवाद की.
The 30-member delegation is scheduled to interact with individuals and groups aiming to bring the valley, which is facing unrest following the killing of Hizbul militant Burhan Wani on the 8th of July. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And in some other news, the CBI today carried out searches at the houses of former Haryana Chief Minister Bhupinder Singh Hooda and one UPSC member. Raids were also carried out in 18 other locations in a case of alleged irregularities in the acquisition of land in Gurgaon. The searched areas are, the searches are related to the allotment of 400 acres in Manesar between 2004 and 2007, allegedly acquired at cheap rates from villagers. The land was allegedly sold to private builders. The CBI filed a case last year alleging that villagers were cheated of 1,500 crore rupees in the deal.
जो रेड चल रही है वो सिर्फ द्वेष भावना से की गई है, इसमें कोई इसका कोई अर्थ नहीं है और ना ही कोई बरामद होने वाला, ना ही कोई बात है. कोई वैसे एक वाहवाही लूटने के लिए ना, क्योंकि हाउस में ये बहुत इस बार बेइज्जती हुई थी सरकार की. भाई प्रकाश सिंह रिपोर्ट पे कोई एक्शन नहीं लिया, झिंगड़ा कमीशन पे कोई एक्शन नहीं लिया, उसके लिए एक द्वेष भावना एक वो बनाया है, शोषा साथ छेड़ने के लिए पब्लिक में भी हम एक्शन ले रहे हैं.
Well, the threat of Zika virus is now closer home than ever, with 13 Indians testing positive for the virus in Singapore. Concerns are high since the Zika virus is also transmitted by the Aedes mosquito, which is the carrier of dengue. In light of this, the Indian Medical Association has issued a detailed advisory to Indians travelling to Zika-affected countries. The Indian Medical Association has written to the Union government urging it to take precautionary measures against the Zika epidemic. This after the External Affairs Ministry confirmed that 13 Indians had tested positive for the virus in Singapore. The IMA has also appealed to Indians against travelling to Zika-affected countries.
Zika is a concern now. पहले ओलंपिक्स का कंसर्न था तो उस टाइम पे हमने अलर्ट जारी किया था और अब सिंगापुर में क्योंकि केसेस आ गए हैं, इंडिया में आने की संभावना है और इंडिया में इस वक्त में चिकनगुनिया और डेंगू का एपिडेमिक चल रहा है. इसका मतलब है कि यहाँ पे मॉस्किटो की जो संख्या है बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो एक बार जीका आ जाए तो एकदम से जीका फैल सकता है हमारी कंट्री के अंदर में.
With the dengue causing Aedes mosquito already plaguing the national capital, entry of the Zika virus would pose an even bigger threat. Antibodies for the disease will not be available immediately since it is a new one.
सबसे पहले तो अवेयरनेस होती है. अवेयरनेस तो सब डॉक्टरों के पास है और बाकी जहाँ तक है इसकी टेस्टिंग की वो नॉर्मली अवेलेबल नहीं है. एक बार वो अवेलेबल हो जाए तो बाकी जैसे वायरल इलनेस के लिए हम लोग तैयार हैं.
The most common symptoms of Zika are joint pain, conjunctivitis, rash and fever. Although the virus has not been life-threatening so far, pregnant women can pass on the virus to their fetuses. Infection in the womb can cause the child to develop neurological disorders and stop the development of its brain.
हमारी IMA ने 3-4 चीज़ें अलर्ट्स की हैं. डॉक्टरों को बोला है कि अगर आपको कहीं पर भी माइक्रोसेफेली का केस अल्ट्रासाउंड में मिले, नोटिफाई करें. अगर उनको कोई गुलन-बारी सिंड्रोम का केस मिलता है तो उसको नोटिफाई करें और उसके अलावा उनको कोई भी डेंगू का केस मिलता है जिसकी आंखें लाल हैं तो इमीडिएटली जीका अलर्ट घोषित करके उसके टेस्ट करें. पहला केस पकड़ने की कोशिश करें प्राइवेट सेक्टर के अंदर में. और दूसरा कि जो लोग सिंगापुर जा रहे हैं प्रेग्नेंट लेडीज़ ना जाएं और ख़ासकर जो लोग वहाँ पे जा रहे हैं किसी भी प्रेग्नेंट लेडी के साथ में जो सेक्सुअल रिलेशनशिप ना करें अगर उनका कोई भी पार्टनर वहाँ पर है. और अगर कहीं पर भी जाते हैं और उनको कोई सिम्टम्स होते हैं, आंखें लाल होती हैं तो आके इमीडिएटली इन्फॉर्म करें ताकि उनसे किसी को इन्फेक्शन ना हो.
No specific medicine or treatment is available for the virus so far. Therefore, prevention is the only precaution we can take for now. Anu Devan's report for Rajya Sabha TV. And news now from the national capital. The Aam Aadmi Party today suspended its MLA Sandeep Kumar over the CD scandal controversy. The former Women and Child Development Minister presented himself at a police station in Delhi after the alleged woman in the CD lodged a police complaint against him. The woman claimed that Kumar gave her a cold drink laced with drugs, after which he allegedly forced her into the act. Earlier, Kumar was suspended for 4 days after a high-level meeting of top Aam Aadmi Party leaders decided to remove him. The former minister's expulsion brought out divisions in the party, with one section defending him.
नहीं, पार्टी से कार्रवाई हो रही है संदीप कुमार पे। संदीप कुमार ने जो किया है वो गलत किया है और उनको अभी प्राइमरी मेंबरशिप से सस्पेंड किया गया है और अनुशासन समिति को पूरा मामला दिया गया है। अनुशासन समिति की जो भी रिकमेंडेशन आएगी, जो भी उसकी डिसीजन होगा, वो पार्टी फॉलो करेगी, लेकिन उनको प्राइमरी मेंबरशिप से पीएसी ने सस्पेंड कर दिया है आज सुबह डिस्कशन करने के बाद। नहीं, संदीप कुमार ने जो किया है उसको डिफेंड नहीं किया जा सकता, क्योंकि संदीप कुमार का आचरण पूरी तरह से पार्टी की स्वच्छता के हिसाब से गलत है और आशुतोष ने जो कहा वो उनकी अपनी राय हो सकती है, लेकिन पूरी पार्टी संदीप को लेके बहुत क्लियर है।
Moving on, the Enforcement Directorate today issued its second attachment order for assets of businessman Vijay Mallyas. The seized property is reported to be worth 6,630 crore rupees, includes some of his farmhouses, flats and FDs. The agency has so far attached assets worth over 8,000 crore rupees. A few ago, it attached assets worth 1,411 crore rupees. Based on a complaint filed by a State Bank of India-led consortium, the CBI had last month registered a fresh case of alleged cheating against Mallyas and companies. Mallyas owes 9,000 crore rupees in loans to banks and is currently reported to be in London. He left India in March this year. And moving on to the international front now, the Philippines government has blamed the militant group Abu Sayyaf for a blast that killed at least 13 people in Davao, which is the home city of President Rodrigo Duterte. A state of lawlessness has now been declared following the blast.
A huge explosion ripped a packed night market in Philippines' Davao City late on Friday, killing at least a dozen and injuring many others. The explosion took place in President Rodrigo Duterte's hometown, prompting him to declare a state of lawlessness. The government has blamed militant group Abu Sayyaf for the blast.
I might just declare a state of lawless violence. It's not martial law, but I am inviting now the armed forces of the Philippines, the military and the police to run the country in accordance with my specifications.
President Duterte is hugely popular in Davao, having served as its mayor for more than 22 years. Visiting the injured at a hospital, he offered assistance to their families. Duterte said that police and the military will be authorized to conduct searches in a bid to stop terrorism. The explosion took place close to the high-end Marco Polo Hotel that is popular with tourists and business people and is also frequented by the president. Authorities say Abu Sayyaf wanted to retaliate after suffering heavy casualties in its stronghold of Jolo Island after a military offensive. Philippines' capital Manila was put on high alert after the blast, but residents say they are in fear.
Delikado eh. Kaya nga natutruma nga kami kung magtitinda kami ulit baka sabog na mangyayari ulit yung pagsabog. Kaya ihinto muna kami ng.
Hundreds of residents attended the memorial service with a message of, while others offered flowers at the site where the blast occurred. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And some more international stories in the global buzz. At least 15 people went missing and 34 people died after Typhoon Lion Rock caused floods in North Korea. Around 44,000 people were evacuated from the worst affected Hamgyong province. Lion Rock, the 10th typhoon of the season in the Pacific, ravaged North Korea after causing significant material damage this week in neighboring China as well, leaving at least 14 dead in Japan. US Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton told FBI that she did not recall all the briefings she received on handling sensitive information due to a concussion she suffered in 2012. The Bureau released a summary of the interview conducted on the 2nd of July with her, as well as other details of their investigation. Clinton, who's challenging Republican Donald Trump for the White House in the 8th November election, has been dogged out by the fallout from her private email account for more than a year. The funeral of Uzbekistan's President Islam Karimov took place in the city of Samarkand today. 78-year-old Karimov died yesterday after suffering a brain hemorrhage. Russia's Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev led world leaders and officials in the funeral. His death leaves a power vacuum in a nation that serves as a bulwark against militant Islam in Central Asia. And moving on to some sports news now. It was a mixed day for the Indians on day 5 of the US Open. Sania Mirza and Rohan Bopanna won their respective mixed doubles first round matches. However, Leander Paes and Rohan Bopanna, they in fact tasted defeat in the men's doubles event with their respective partners. In the mixed doubles, the Indo-Croat top seeds of Sania Mirza and Ivan Dojic thrashed American Taylor Townsend and Donald Young 6-4, 6-4 to move into the second round. Indo-Canadian pair of Rohan Bopanna and Gabriela Dabrowski also advanced to the mixed doubles second round after beating Noah Rubin and Jamie Loeb 7-5, 6-4. In the men's doubles, Leander Paes and Andre Begman failed to progress past the opening round after losing to Stefan Robert and Dudi Sela. The Indo-German pair lost 6-2, 5-7, 4-6. In another match, Indo-Danish pair of Rohan Bopanna and Fredrik Nielsen crashed out after losing to Brian Baker and Marcus Daniel in the second round. In doubles, top seed Novak Djokovic advanced to the fourth round after his Russian opponent Mikhail Yuzny retired due to a leg injury after trailing 4-2 in the first set. Defending champion Djokovic will next face 21-year-old Briton Kylie Edmund, who upset 20th seeded American John Isner 6-4, 3-6, 6-2, 7-6. Fourth seed Rafael Nadal also eased into the last 16 with a straight set 6-1, 6-4, 6-2 win over Russian Andrei Kuznetsov. American Jack Sock knocked former champion Marin Cilic out in a power-packed 6-4, 6-3, 6-3 third round victory to reach the fourth round. And in the women's singles, world number 2 Angelique Kerber swept past American qualifier Cici Bellis 6-1, 6-1 to reach the fourth round, while Britain's Johanna Konta breezed past Switzerland's Belinda Bencic 6-2, 6-1 to reach the last 16. And some more sports news in the Sports Beat. Just days after Yogeshwar Dutt's London Olympics bronze was upgraded to silver, the star Indian wrestler's medal may now get converted into gold. According to reports, Asgarov of Azerbaijan, who won the gold medal in the men's 60 kg freestyle category at the 2012 London Games, has also tested positive for consuming performance-enhancing drugs. Argentina striker Lionel Messi will miss Tuesday's 2018 World Cup qualifier away to Venezuela with a groin problem. Messi made a triumphant return after his short-lived international retirement by scoring the winning goal in Thursday's 1-0 victory over Uruguay in Mendoza. Manchester City striker Sergio Aguero was given a 3-match ban for violent conduct. Aguero was punished retrospectively by the Football Association after television cameras caught him elbowing West Ham defender Winston Reid during City's Premier League victory last weekend. And that's all we have time for in this bulletin. Thanks for watching.